Alright, I just went live, so everyone should be able to hear you. Anyone who listens to this recording. Alright, here's the link to the recording. Alright. Let's go over... Alright, first I think what we can do is go over prefabs, because that is really important concept that we did not go over before. So let's do that. Let me just find a little test. All right, so let's just take here we go. Cushions. Great. So, we're gonna go over prefabs real quick first. It's really important. It's pretty much one of the foundations to how Unity works and how you organize and manage assets across multiple scenes. So let's see. So I just brought in this 3D mesh. Pretty simple. It's just these cushions here. Let's see. You can see that in the 3D modeling file, there's looks like there's actually two sets of each cushion, which is also really common. You'll see them dragged in here. They're actually really tiny, so I'm going to go ahead and click on the base FBX file, and I'm going to go to the scale factor and bring it up to 1. Sometimes that happens. You have to fix the scale factor. Oftentimes, other things you'll want to do for new meshes is generate colliders. We don't really create custom colliders on LOE because everything's low poly enough that we can kind of just use the mesh, the base mesh, as also the collider mesh, which isn't the most optimized way to do things, but it works for us. So now that that's in correctly, if I drag it in, yeah, that's a little bit better of a scale. Let's see. There's no materials, which is sad. Let's see. Oh, I see. It looks like this is only 2 cushions. Yeah, so while we're here, I guess we can even talk about LODs. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but the idea here was that, we have these cushions for far distance and these cushions for closer, just as our LODs. So eventually what you'd want to do is, you'd be more precise than me, but we'd have them perfectly overlap so that when the LOD script sees that a player has gotten, say, within 50 or 100 meters, it's going to pop into the higher poly variant of the mesh. But we're not going to worry about that. Our focus mainly is prefabs. So I have this base FBX that I just brought into Unity. Oh, I should make sure my sound settings are working. Yes, they are. Good. Okay, so we have this base mesh that I brought in. The settings are all right. We don't have to really touch rigging or animation settings on it. You could even set this to none if you want under rigging. It doesn't really matter, but since there's absolutely no rigging, I'm gonna do that. All right. So now we have these cushions. What's really important is organizing the prefab properly before you create it. So right now we're just working with these base meshes. And this is what the file looked like just being dragged in from, I think Maya was where I created these. So this is great and all, but now everything is parented under this one sort of empty container root. So what we want to do is split it up so that the round cushions go together and the square cushions go together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to game object, create empty. I think that that really simple initial tutorial talked about this, so I'm not going to go into it too much. But essentially, creating an empty game object is most often used, well, not most often, but it is often used for for grouping things. You use it essentially as a folder. So I would go ahead here and let me just rename this. I think if I slow click, it's better rename up here. So let's name this uh, square cushion. I'm really bad at spelling square cushion. Oftentimes, oftentimes people use I think it's called camel case. That's uh, probably one of the most accepted naming schemes. But in Unity, you can also just use spaces. Unity is very space friendly, I guess, compared to other programs like, say, Maya. All right, so we have our square cushion. You'll see it's just an empty layer. All it has is a transform node, which actually the transform node is not zeroed out. We definitely want things to be zeroed out when we start off. So I'm going to go ahead and zero this out. Now we're perfectly on the origin. So let's go ahead and start grouping this. So we have our round cushion low, round cushion high. I'm just going to control click both of those and then drag them into the empty container we just made. So it's saying losing prefab. We don't have to worry about that because basically that's just warning us that we're breaking the first, we're breaking this layer up, and that's fine. All right, so let's see. Oh, you know what? Let me just undo that. Sorry. Let's see. I kind of want this to be on the 0, too. Sometimes that doesn't work because, yeah, so this isn't going to zero out perfectly because it was brought in, not on the origin. So theoretically, when I first did this, I did it wrong. Whenever you export models out from Maya or pretty much anything from any program to go into Unity or another game engine, you pretty much always want it to be zeroed out. So I didn't do that. Um, it's all right though. It's not the end of the world. So let me put them back in here. Yes, we're gonna do that. But the original is the root empty game object is zeroed out, which is fine. All right, great. So now we have pretty much the makings of our prefab. This is going to be a really simple one. So now all we literally have to do, super easy. Usually you put it in like a prefabs folder. It's good organization. So all I have to do is take Oops, I named this. This should be round cushion. Silly. All right. Excellent. So now all we do is we take our root layer that we want to turn into a prefab, and oh, it's worth noting here. So let's see. Let me go ahead. All right, so we're gonna make this prefab. Literally all you do is drag it into whatever folder you want the prefab to be stored, and boom, now it's a prefab. Now how do I know it's a prefab? First off, if I click on it, I can see it's called roundcushion.prefab. So you can see that it actually generated a new file called .prefab. And additionally, you can see in the hierarchy that it turned blue, which means that it is a prefab. And a third indicator is if you look in the inspector, you'll see that it has this blue cube as well as the word prefab and some other buttons here that it didn't have before. If I just go onto like an empty container, you can see that, for instance, the base model file we brought in, it has this little white scrap of paper and it says model. So there's a lot of different ways that you can tell um, the difference between a prefab and just a base sort of model. Um, all right, excellent. So why are prefabs important? Let's go over that. So now I have this prefab. I don't even need this one in the scene anymore. I can delete it. I can do pretty much whatever I want because it's saved down here. So if I redrag it in, it didn't spawn at the origin, which makes me sad. Let's see. Oh, did I maybe? Ooh, I think I know what I did wrong. I'm just gonna try and fix this real quick. I think I was on let's see. It's really important that you keep things by the origin. So, you know, I'm really doing it a kind of a shoddy way right now. If you were to do it the right way, you would import your model around the origin, and that would be that would be much better. But I'm looking at it from a side view. Cushions, you always want them to stick in the ground. These are designed to go in the ground slightly. So I'm just gonna put it right under the ground plane like that. All right, so now our cushion should have the proper, yes, the proper line. That will be perfect. So I'm gonna do it real quick one more time. Just delete our old prefab, put our new one in. All right, so let's see if I did it better this time. Great. Now, when I drag it in, it has the zeroed out transforms that I want, and it's also going to be on the right plane too. So let's see if I just add just a plane. Oh man, that's really ugly. What if I create a light? Great. And just give us some light to work with here. All right, so yeah. So perfect. That would look pretty decent sitting on the ground, not too bad. All right, so we have everything we need now. Our round cushion is the correct prefab. So why did we make this a prefab? I'm going to show you the primary reason that prefabs are so important. So we have both of our cushions. Now let's say that I was like, going around, placing cushions around a floor or something, and blah blah blah. Everything was fine and dandy, and I had millions of cushions all over the world. And all of the sudden, my lead programmer came back to me, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, these cushions are way too high poly. You're spamming them all over the world. You need to fix them right now because we can't. You're ruining you're ruining the game." So now I need to lower the poly of my cushions. So how do I do that? Well, let's take one that we have over here and say, all right, I go into my 3D modeling program and I model a lower poly cushion. So I'm going to say, bring in my other lower poly cushion. And right now I'm just using the same file as an example, but this could be anything. So, all right, I'm going to take my lower poly cushion, and programming has decided that this is the only cushion that will work. So unfortunately, I'm going to just take my prefab uh, and go to global here. And I'm just going to, well, all right, once again, we should be working around the origin. So let's do that. Should always be working around the origin. Is everyone, can anyone hear me all right and stuff? Is anyone paying attention? Excuse me. All right, cool. So yeah, so my programmer says I need to optimize this. So now I have my cushion. Oops, cancel that. So now I have my cushion at the origin. Everything's fine. So I'm just gonna have to get rid of the high poly version. This really stinks, but that's just the way it goes. And because we had two, I am going to just show actually changing the prefab. So I'm going to put in, even though it's the same cushion, the idea for this example is that you could sub in or out any mesh or anything really. A prefab can be anything. It can be a particle effect. It could be a script. It could be pretty much anything. It's actually really amazing. So, I'm going to say, all right, great. We're just going to have, you know what? If we were to actually do this, correctly, let's say, all right, so we know this is my new mesh. I'm just going to delete both of them. And I'm going to put my new one. This is my new mesh that we just brought in, remember? All right. It's gone forever. Is that really the origin over there? Oh, it is. Okay. Sorry, I'm kind of getting lost here. Oh, I see. I need to pull this out first. Great, great. So now hopefully this will go to the origin. Perfect. So, all right, now I'm just going to clean up a bit of things. We don't need all these other files that this is the base mesh, so I'm just going to delete those. So now you'll see that this is still a prefab. I deleted out in these other prefabs, you can see, they're blue. They have these other two things in them. And even though this is black, it turned black, it's still a prefab because I can look at it up here and see that it's the blue cube. It says prefab. So this is still linked to these other prefabs that are the same, the same thing. The only reason that it's black is because I have made custom changes to this prefab. So because this is now different, it's not like universal like all these other cushions, it turns it black. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and take my new cushion and I'm going to put it into my old prefab. All right, so great. Now this new cushion, highly optimized, programming is really happy. But now, oh no, I've got the new cushion I need, and I've got a million other cushions in the whole world that are the old ones. So this is what prefabs are for. So now I should be able to go to the root layer. Under prefabs, these three wonderful little buttons, I'm going to go to apply. Now this is really powerful. You kind of have to be careful doing this, but what apply means is that it's going to take your current prefab that you're working on. So I've been fiddling around with this one, changing it, and it's going to apply all the changes that you made from that prefab to all the others that are the same, the same prefab. They're the same thing, even though I guess I don't really know exactly how to describe it, but this and like say this, they're the same prefab. Like these two are the same prefab, but they can still have local differences. Like they can still be different, which allows for a lot of flexibility. Say I want to have 100 prefabs that are exactly the same, but then in a scene, I need to change a couple. Like you can still do that. But for the most case, you want to keep prefabs the same so you can apply universal changes to them. So I'm going to go to the new one that we just made and I'm going to hit apply and boom. Just like that, it updated all of my other prefabs in my entire project to now follow um, the exact same setup that the one we just tweaked is. So this is essentially exactly how prefabs work and why they are so powerful. Anything that repeats in your project, basically anything that isn't a one-off thing. Like if you have a model, like a custom building that's only being used once in the entire project, that doesn't really need to be a prefab because it's a unique one-off thing. But any object that um, isn't one off, there's pretty much more than one of, you should make it into a prefab. Um, all right, great. So that is basics to prefabs. A couple things I didn't, couple quick cleanup things. Let me see if I can undo that. I wonder if it'll even let me undo that change. Wow, it doesn't even let me undo prefab changes. Good to know. That's why I said you got to be careful when you hit that apply button. But what I was also going to illustrate is that if you're on a prefab, you can, let's say I made all those tweaks to that new one and like it wasn't working out. I didn't like how it was turning out. What I can also do is hit revert and that'll essentially undo all the local changes to a specific prefab and it'll turn it into what the universal prefab is saved in the prefab. This one is your universal. So if you ever want to make changes, usually you want to drag in whatever is in your actual assets folder and change that one. Because then you'll be sure that you have a nice fresh new one that has no tweaks to it at all. All right, great. Does anyone have any questions on that? Prefabs, important. Cushions, pretty. All right, sweet. So that is prefabs. Now what I wanted to go over, we're kind of gonna do a little jump here. But what I wanted to go over now, continuing with sort of our introduction to Unity, is a bit of Shuriken. Um, Now, Shuriken is Unity's built-in particle system. Um, it's pretty nice. It has pros and cons to it, as most things do. And we're going to jump right into it. So let me get rid of all these cushions. We don't really need them anymore. We can leave this here, I guess. Oh, wow, I already had a whole set. What else was here? Oh, I did. Hmm. Oh, whatever, don't need it. Great. Let's go into Shuriken now. So I am going to go ahead and go to, let me find it here. Here we go. Game object, create other particle system. All right. So, um, after you create a particle system, you'll see that on the right side, it will appear in your inspector. Um, Now, all of these menus are going to appear, and every one of these menus can be expanded out to have various sub options. Um, Now, there's a lot of options, as usual for 3D software development, but I actually like very much how Unity organizes these, and I think that the headings are actually really helpful. They're really descriptive. If you're making a particle system, force over lifetime, color over speed, even if you have no idea and you've never used Shuriken in your life, these headings are really nice and descriptive and pretty much say exactly what they do. So that's really helpful. It's a lot better than Unity's old particle system, that's for sure. All right. So we start with the base Unity generator, which is just going to generate these, kind of bland floating particles. And I'm going to go on to just textured for now. We don't need to see the polygons really too much. All right, great. You'll see this little thing will appear in the bottom right. Really simple. That's just going to give you some nice feedback as to the exact time, which you can scrub through. It's also going to let you stop and start your simulation. All right. So what do I want to talk about with this particle effect? I guess I'm going to go over just some more crucial areas. I mean, I could go over every tab, but that's kind of a lot. So let's go over mm, some crucial ones. Like, for instance, the base particle system tab. It's actually the biggest one. Um, this is going to have all of your general settings. So let's see. Like, lifetime is really important. Start lifetime will actually drive the overall lifetime of your effect. Um, and to be quite honest, the best way to learn this is to just play around with every slider. I know it sounds a little bit brute force, but that's really going to be the best way to learn this. Me just kind of, sitting here playing with it isn't really going to help you quite as much. But, it still will to some extent, I believe. All right, great. So let's just like try to make something. I think that's going to be more useful than me just going over every button in the menu. All right, so let's try and make like a basic AoE Like ability. All right. So I have some particles here. How do I want this ability to look? Um, let's make it a circle. We'll have some very subtle, maybe effects, kind of like this rising up to it. And let me get in let me get in some scale, because whenever you're creating a particle effect, scale is very important. So here we go. Bring you in. Cute little test pony. You know what? Ew, this pony's ugly. I didn't mean it. It wasn't that ugly, but I want a real pony. Where is it? See, if we were in our regular project, I wouldn't have to find this. Hmm, I don't see it. I think I actually organized it. So we're just gonna use that pony. Uh, sometimes, yeah, we're just gonna have to use that one. Oh, I already have it in here. Whoops. All right, great. So, we're gonna have an AoE effect around this pony. It's gonna be great. Let's just put it at our origin, as we should do with everything. Great. All right, so have our particle system. Now, instantly I see that, well, I need to somehow, make the radius a little bit nicer. You can't really even see it at all. So I think I'm going to go over to the Shape tab, and I'm going to increase the radius. Right now it's under Cone. These are all the different options you have for the various shapes that you can make. Let me just increase the emission so you can kind of see what's going on a bit more. Usually more particles let you. All right, let's decrease the size a bit, and maybe increase the speed a bit. And let's just bump up the number like a crap ton. There we go. So now you can really start to see what's going on here. Spherical will emit from the center, unless you tab this little box, and then it'll emit from the shell. So, there's uses for both of those. Hemisphere, just half a sphere. It's also really useful, especially for AoEs, and you still have the emit from shell, emit from center. Cone, which is what I was doing before. This is probably what I'm going to use, because I want these nice little magical wisps to come up from the ground. So I'm probably going to use this. But let me just finish going through. Box, the uses for the box. I don't really. Oh wow, you can actually. Oh yeah, I have used the box. The box is good, I found, when I want to make like I think I used it to make a waterfall one time, and that worked out pretty good. So yeah, and then of course, you can use a custom mesh, which is great. This is something, you'll have to explore around with a bit more, but like, oh, you know what? Like, let's see what happens if we emit from the pony. That's so silly. But you can see that even on a complex mesh like this, it's working, It looks like it's somehow taking the normals direction of the mesh and emitting out. So that's a really powerful tool that, you'd want to play with, probably with simpler meshes, but, there's a lot of cool things you could do with that. But for now, we're just going to go with a cone. Let's fix the rotation. All right, that didn't fix the rotation. All right, whatever. Got this. So great. I want to have these wisps coming out. So first of all, I'm going to move the, let's see, what is this even changing? We're on cone, radius. So yeah, you can see this is kind of confusing. I'm on the shape tab and I'm controlling the cone, but changing this top control, in 3D view, this is how I can change the angle, but Unity is actually letting me take this center controller and bring it up and down, and it's actually adjusting the start speed, which is pretty interesting. I didn't really know that's exactly what that adjusted, but it's giving us the effect that we want, which is good because we want this to be a lot subtler. We don't want it to like rise up and obscure the pony. So I'm gonna, whoops, I'm going to, gonna bring it up a little bit and let's see how high up we're going. All right, we're just going up to the pony's legs. Not bad. All right, so good. We have that. It's playing at a decent speed. We have a lot of particles here. I'm going to tone that down a bit. Um, Particle limitations, you just need to talk with the programmer or me. It depends on the particle, it depends on the situation, the scale. There's a lot of limitations. I mean, I'm sorry, a lot of factors that play into how many particles you can get away with. But a really good way to look at it is to go over into wireframe mode. Now, I can actually see the planes and how this actually works. Camera facing planes that are just, textured. Even cooler, let's see if I can find it. There's like a special setting here. Ooh, is it overdraw? Textured? Yeah, here we go. This is really cool. So it's this setting here. It's called a overdraw. And what it's going to do is essentially just give everything like a neutral color. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but as as planes start to overlap, what happens is the overdraw makes you more aware of that because the opacity is decreasing because let's say each one of these planes has like 10% opacity. If there's 10 planes stacked right in front or behind of each other, you're not going to be able to see through it. So the idea is that let's say I have a ridiculous effect that all right, I think 6,000 particles is very cool. But now look at how bright yellow this is. Um, the overdraw just gives you some good feedback as to where you should probably optimize. Because what this means, because this is bright yellow, you're having a lot of waste. Because players are most likely only going to see um, the front effect. But Unity's still having to draw all of these back effects. So overdraw is a really great way to sort of visualize how efficient you're being. So, all right, we're gonna go back to normal. We're gonna not use 6,000 particles. Let's go down to like, I don't know, I think the 250, maybe even 200 is probably all right for now. All right, so great. Now, I want this to not emit outwards. I want it to emit straight up. It's going too fast for me, first of all. So let's bump it down to like 2. You know what? Even that is too fast. I'm going down to 1. And lifetime is probably what we want because you can see that they're just appearing and then dying really fast. I want them to live a little bit longer. So if you kind of think of it that way in general terms, usually you can find the attribute that helps you. So start lifetime. That's looking like it's allowing them to live longer and float up, more gently. All right, great. So let's just make it a little bit higher. Great. Now, this is not looking too bad, but the particles are just, when they die, they just pop out. And that looks kind of bad. I don't really like it. It's just, it's like, why do they just disappear instantly? I want them to kind of fade away. So this is going to be a common thing that you're going to want to do in many particle effects, is a fade effect. So I'm going to go over that now. Now I do a fade effect with color over lifetime. Now it's a little bit more underhanded because, well, it's not color, we're trying to do the transparency. But this color over lifetime tab actually supports transparency too. So that's kind of where they put transparency. So when I maximize the tab, well, first I turn it on. Then I maximize the tab and click on this little bar. All right, great. So we have this tool, which is pretty useful. So if I click on the top part, I generate a new slider there. If I click on the bottom part, I generate a new slider there. I guess it's not really user-friendly that you know how to do that, but yeah, so you click on that. The bottom part is going to drive transparency, I believe. Let's see. Yes, I'm sorry. The top drives transparency, the bottom drives color. And you can tell that because when I click on the bottom, the color picker option appears. And when I click on the top, the transparency slider appears. So great, this is exactly what we need. Now, this bar represents essentially time zero particle initiate to particle death. So we want it to fade out right around the particle death, which is going to be at the top. So I'm going to take this last slider and move it to 0% transparency. Now we instantly get feedback right on this bar that that we are going to fully transparent. That's what the checkered box means. And we can see that it updated in real time. This is already looking a lot better. Our particles are poofing out much more naturally, almost like a smog or a smoke effect. All right, so I'm going to do that. And great. This is exactly what we want. Now let's continue. I think this is all right. Now, all right, let's move on to something else to make it look nicer. Now they're fading out a bit nicer, which is great, but it still looks really repetitive. It's the same exact size particle moving at the same exact speed. So we need to vary it so there's more visual interest in how the particles move and also their inherent properties, like their size. So I'm going to go for size first. Let's see. We're going to go over to start size, and you can see right now it's already set to 0.11. Now sliding this would just change it all universally. Now, what we want is to randomize that. So this is going to probably be the most important thing that I talk about today in Shuriken, is these buttons over here. They're tiny little chevron arrows that you could almost miss, and they're going to be next to almost every attribute. And they are so powerful. So you're going to tap on this, and you're going to see that it's going to give me a couple options. These options will change depending on the attribute, but for this one I have curve, random between two constants, or random between two curves. Now, what I want to do is make it so that the particle spawns at a differing size. So let's just go with the curve and I'll show you what that does. So that instantly replaces this, from a field where you put one number to a curve, and then the curve is here. Now, all right, you guys are gonna kill me over this one, but so if you look at this, it puts this curve editor window in this lower right, and there's no obvious way to pop it out. What you actually have to do is right click on this top bar. There's no way you'd really know that unless you just knew. But I'm going to tell you, you right click and it pops out. It's kind of silly, but you learn these things over time. All right, so right now the curve is completely flat. Let's just see what happens when we change 1. So now all of the particles are essentially dying out over time. This is because at time 0, we are telling them to spawn at our full rate of 0.05 and then taper down to spawning nothing. And then because the whole duration of the simulation is 3.92 seconds, that's when it restarts. We can see that when we hit simulate, and let's see, right as we come up, so right now we're at 3.75. As soon as we hit 3.92, you see it just started looping. The particles started spawning according to our curve. Now, this is cool. It's a cool effect, but it's not what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and check out some of the other ones. Let's do random between two constants. This is what we want. Now, it gives us two numbers, start size, and now we can determine, based on these two numbers, what we want the variation in size to be. So already I've now started, we don't want to go down to 0 because then some particles are going to have no size, which is silly. So let's go down to like 0.05. No, I like them really tiny actually. Like 0.02 maybe. Yeah, so now we're randomizing between 0.02 and 0.07. And already this just looks so much better. Okay, so great. The only thing we didn't talk about is random between two curves. Just to illustrate the point, I'm going to bring this up. This is probably the most powerful option, and also, getting to be the most complex to work with, because now you are simultaneously randomizing the start size over lifetime between two curves. So, for example, let's say I want them to, at the very beginning, I want them all to spawn at the same size. I could set that. Then I could set it to go into a huge randomizing, so then at time, let's say 1 second, it's going to randomize between 0.7, which I think this is set at, or 0.6, right around there, and 0.15. Then when it gets to say up to time 2, the randomization is going to get back to be much closer. It's going to randomize between 0.045 and 0.055. This, I don't want to really dwell on it because these start to get kind of complex to think about, but it's just this is the most powerful option in this attributes to randomize. I don't think we need that. That's going to be a bit of overkill for this. So I'm going to go back to random between two curves, and I think we had it set to 0.2 and 0.6. That's fine. All right, great. So now we have our effect. It's already looking loads better than it did before. Whoops, there we go. It's already looking loads better than it did before. Now, let's keep sprucing it up. So we have the size much nicer. It fades out, but it still looks generic because they're all traveling the same speed. To give the particles more character and, to make them look a little more unique, I think it'd look nicer if maybe they, traveled at slightly varying speeds. So let's see. I believe that would be our start speed. Yes. Now we can use the exact same system that we used before to, let's see, where were we? Start speed. We can use the exact same system we did before, random between two constants, and already, even just flipping the switch, some of these particles down here, so they're not really traveling fast enough. These ones that are kind of just sitting on the ground. So we know that our start speed can go down to 0. All right, that's why. So maybe we do 0.03 because I want them to go up a little bit. Some of these really slow ones are still just barely leaving the ground. So maybe 0.05, 0.04, and we'll randomize that between 0.04 and 0.08. We'll give it like a twice as much speed variation. Now, it may be tough to see the difference. Actually, I'm even having trouble seeing the difference here. So I'm going to make a copy of it so I can actually compare the difference. All right. So let's see what the difference is. Let's see. The one on the right has a uniform start speed, and the one on the left has the variable start speed where some particles can go twice as fast as others. So let's see if we can see the difference. Okay. And it's going to be hard to tell, especially probably because this is being live streamed and, the quality's not so great. But I can definitely see the difference here based on the fact that this one has just a much more dynamic movement. And the reason I can see this is because every once in a while I get particles that are moving at that 0.08, that max speed, and that change of 2 times the speed as the default minimum is really giving some of these particles, a much faster feel. And generally, it All right, so let's continue on. I think this is all right. So, stretched particles, that's what I was talking about. A lot of times particles you imagine are like moving through space and time, and they get this distortion effect. And this stretched billboard is a great way to replicate that effect. Um, Now, because our particles are actually moving so slow, I don't really think I want to stretch them very much because, it doesn't really feel like they're moving fast enough to get distorted by air friction or or friction or something like that. So I'm going to distort them a little bit. We could just like a 30% stretch, something like that. That's fine. All right, great. I just want to show you that because that's a really important menu, this little render mode. Um, All right, and great. So now I'm going to keep going with one more thing, and then I'm going to show you one more thing after that. So one issue that I'm also seeing is you can see how the particles are spawning. Some of them are spawning below the ground plane, and when they come through the ground plane, they're intersecting with it, and it just looks really bad. You can't really tell here because, oh yeah, because it's wireframe. But, oh, maybe textured wireframe would show you. Yeah, there we go. So you can see the quads coming through the ground plane like that, and that doesn't look very good. It's like, why are these particles intersecting? So how I'm going to try and fix that is go into orthographic so we can see exactly where the start spawn point is. And for all intents and purposes, the position of this should be in the origin. It's usually the best thing to do. You can move it around. That's not like the rule of law, but it's good to do. And yeah, they're just spawning too low. So how are we going to fix this? Let's see. We could do a... Let's see. There's a couple things we can do. Start lifetime. No. Let's see. So how I would actually do this, I'm trying to find a fancier way to do it, which would probably be more correct, but how I would do this real easily is I would start off by just moving the emitter up a little bit. Probably not the best way to do it, but you know, I was thinking of trying to find a way to just move it so the particles are higher, and I think you can do that. But for now, I'm just going to move the emitter up a bit so it's a little bit closer. You can see that the particles are only spawning. You know, some of them are intersecting with the ground plane, which is this gray line, but it's not that bad. And it's still very short. It's only hitting the pony's, you know, knees, which is great. I want it to be subtle, low to the ground. So great, this is going to help us, but it's still going to be intersecting with the ground. So how I'm going to complete fixing this is I'm actually going to use the same trick that we did with color. I'm going to go in and I'm going to turn down the alpha of the beginning. And as you can see, it didn't really change anything. And this is because, at least I believe it's because the start color is overriding the color over lifetime. So we're going to go to the start color, and if you click on this, you'll see there's this little A. That stands for alpha. So let's see. I want to do gradient. All right, so I think this is gonna work. I'll make it a gradient. Let's see. I thought I'd be able to do it just with this. All right, I think this is working. Let's see. It's tough to find. You got to find particles. Maybe when we did it in our side view, I think that was giving us a better look at what was happening. Yeah. So yeah, this color over lifetime is working. You can see that right at the beginning they're fading in, just as right at the end they're fading out. I also think that this effect needs to be a little bit higher. It's going from fading in to fading out too quickly. I want them to live a bit longer, so I'm going to bump this up to 2 seconds. Maybe even 2.5. So yeah, now it's raising up a little higher, but it still isn't going much higher than the pony's half of the pony's feet, or I'm sorry, legs. So it still works pretty good, I think. All right. Now, the last thing I'm going to show is importing a custom texture. So this is a technique that I wanted to show you because it's pretty useful. And then I'm going to wrap it up for today because I don't want it to be painful to get through these videos. Let me just, let's see. I'm just gonna find the correct file. Oh man, there's no way I'm gonna find this. Ugh, there's no way I'm gonna find this. So, oh, we're going to just make one real quick. It'd be easier for me to find. Oh, you know what? Check this out. I just found this. Let's use this. All right, really stereotypical. Um, really stereotypical, but we are going to use this. So I'm going to bring in my magical ring. It's already been set up to have a nice alpha. You know, black is clear, white is transparent. Obviously, this is kind of stereotypical, like random runic symbols and stuff, but it will still help a lot because we're creating a circular AoE. So I'm going to go to my particle system. I'm now going to create an empty game object and rename it particles, whatever. Maybe, you'd want a better name than that. AoE circle. Okay, and we're going to use the same prefab conventions that we did before. And I'm going to take this magical ring, and this is going to be where it gets a bit tricky. This is going to be where it's a bit tricky. But we're going to create a new material. Create material. I'm going to name it ring. I'm kind of speeding through this a bit, but you'll see that I created a default Lambert material. I'm going to go ahead and drag my custom texture into the texture slot. And then I'm going to go up to the shader. A shader is what drives how the material is displayed. So I'm going to go to this huge drop down. You're going to want to explore all of these. These are all really important. They all do specific custom things, but we're going to stick to the particles. And additive soft are both really great ones. So we're going to actually do particles additive soft. Well, you know what? Actually, additives looked a little bit better, I think. All right, great. So now we can already see in the preview window that, this is rendering correctly. All right, so now I am going to go to my let's see. Now I'm going to go to game object, create other plane, set it to 0, 0, 0. I don't see it. Aha, I do. It's just right below the surface. I'm going to raise it up a tiny bit. You'd want to make it so it's the exact extents of your system. And you'd also wouldn't want to use Unity's default plane, because look at all these polys. All we need is a quad, 2 triangles. So you'd want to use your own plane that isn't like, high poly like this. But anyway, now that we have this plane, I am going to put in our material we just made into into... Oh no, I know what I need. I'm sorry. We need another particle system, which is going to go down to the renderer, change it to mesh, because we want to use a custom mesh, and then we plug our material in here, and we change the mesh to quad. We're getting closer, but we don't want it to move. We only want it to emit one. Start speed, we don't want any speed at all, basically. And it's a little bit, let's see. We're going to change the rate to 0, and we're going to put this on a burst of 1. What that means is that at time 0, it's going to burst and only create one particle. Now, this is very useful because it means that we now only have one, but it's appearing randomly, not really randomly, but it's appearing off center. We want it to be centered. So let's change this to, say, a mesh. There we go. Perfect, we're getting there. So now we're creating our circle, and it should be disappearing right at the duration time, which we want to match with our other effect, 3.92. We go to our new effect, go to 3.92. Now, when we run both of these particles simultaneously, they're going to last for the same time. And I don't think I can just scale it up. No, I can't. All right, so start size. We want to expand that out. Whoops. Simulate pause. And as you can see, this is still off center. Yeah. You would want to be a little more precise than me. You want to keep these centered. Oh, it looks like our other particle effect isn't centered. Well, centering is pretty easy. And what I really wanted to just illustrate is how you can overlay effects like this. So now we have this popping in. Let's use the same technique that we used before, color over lifetime. Go to the color tab, increase the start alpha or decrease the start alpha down to 0. That has a nice fade in effect. Very nice. Now, let's see how our systems act together. This is actually kind of frustrating. I wish there was a way to let's make a new prefab. Let's try that out, see if it works. Yeah, there's not going to be any way I can really play them at the same time, but you get the idea of what the effect is going for. Unfortunately, this is all the time I have for now, but I think this is really going to give you, oops, it's a little bit high. I think it's really going to give you a good sense of how to create particles. There's a lot of menus that I didn't necessarily cover perfectly. So, it's really going to be all about you exploring these menus. But as you can see, even with using, Unity defaults, and yeah, maybe I didn't, I just grabbed this ring, but you can create a much simpler ring, or you can find rings online, or you can, have some nice concept artists make one, and yeah, that'll work out really well. So I hope this was helpful. To recap, we learned about prefabs. We learned a little bit about hierarchy management in prefabs. And we also got a quick look at Unity's Shuriken particle system. I'd really encourage you to play with these other tabs. They're all really powerful and they do unique things. And to not forget about these drop-down arrows to the right. This is how you're really going to take your particles to the highest level they can become in Unity. These random between two curves, random between two constants, that's going to be the key to really, making your particles look nice. All right, I think that's everything. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions or you want to, talk to me, just send me a message. All right, bye.